Welcome to Take Notice, Amplifying Black Stories. I'm your host, Allison Preisinger-Higgins. The mission of this project is to take notice, to listen, to hold space by amplifying Black stories, experiences, and voices. Conversations on family life, finding joy, and interests of folks in our country and around the world who encounter racism on a daily basis. A portion of these discussions will be dedicated to holding space for guests who are comfortable sharing their personal experiences with racism. Stories help us all learn and connect. We are here to listen, to take notice. Thank you for being with us. Let's take a moment to recognize, to take notice of the voices that are so often unheard. Land acknowledgement statements are an important part of honoring those whose land we now live and work on. I have chosen to begin each episode this way to spark ideas and keep these conversations in the front of our minds so that we may learn how to do better. I would like to acknowledge the land on which this episode was created. I would like to show gratitude to the traditional ancestral land of the Shoalwater Bay and Chinook tribes. Recognizing that these names are not the original names of the people of these areas, as I continue to learn how to better acknowledge Native people of these lands, I will adjust the wording of the beginning of each episode. I encourage listeners to research the land on which you live and are listening right now. Recognizing this is just the beginning. Welcome to another episode of Take Notice, and thank you for being here with us. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the tragedy that took place recently in Georgia. We stand with the Asian American community and recognize how much work needs to be done to continue to fight against white supremacy and terrorism. As host and producer of this project, I am dedicated to continuing to learn how I can better serve communities that are on the receiving end of violent, deadly attacks, verbal harassment, and systems that are built to discourage equity. I will be continuing to research and seek out resources to do what I can, and I encourage listeners to do the same, and feel free to share what you find, resources you find, things that you feel like might help others in just showing support for the Asian American community. So there's more to be done, and it will be never ending. So I'm here for that, and hope that this project will assist in that effort as well. In this episode, my guest and I dive straight into an important conversation regarding one of the questions that I've asked every guest so far as part of this project. I mentioned it in a previous episode intro as the reason why I changed the wording of the question, what would make you feel equal? I changed it to what would make you feel seen as equal? And now you will get to hear more of the background of that change. Though in listening back to Yvette and my conversation, I realized that I'm still digesting what Yvette's point of view is on the subject. There's still more to explore in the wording of the question itself in terms of attention. And so I will keep you updated on the progress as I learn and analyze the question more deeply. Always eager to hear your thoughts as listeners as well on this subject or any other subject that we bring up in this project or in the episodes. Feel free to get in touch via email, through our website, or social media. We'd be happy to hear from you. Yvette Dubel is an artist, researcher, founder, CEO of WebAntiphon Group, author of Why Brand Risk Management Innovation is a Game Changer, creator of the Empowered Innovation System, and a personal innovation mentor. Dubel specializes in helping conscious leaders look for creative, strategic thinking with broad knowledge and wisdom to drive triple bottom line success: profit, people, planet. We talk more about her work in our conversation, including some of her artwork that, since we were able to see each other while we chatted through Zoom, she was able to show me, but unfortunately we aren't able to share that with you all. So apologies on that. It's just a short little spot where she shows me a piece of artwork, but you'll have to check out her websites instead. And we discuss those at the end of our talk, and they're in the show notes if you want to check those out. So definitely please do. Thanks again for being here. Please enjoy my conversation with Yvette Dubel. Take Notice would like to take the time to acknowledge Black-owned businesses, organizations, and artists. If you have a suggestion of who we should highlight during our episodes, please find us on social media or visit our website. Based in Portland, Oregon, the Black Resilience Fund is an emergency fund dedicated to healing and resilience by providing immediate resources to Black Portlanders. As of September 2020, the fund has raised over $1,805,000, funding over 3,800 Black Portlanders across 5 counties and counting, including 3,200 grocery boxes delivered to more than 1,500 households. To learn more about the Black Resilience Fund and to support, visit blackresiliencefund.com. Thank you, Yvette, for joining me for Take Notice. How are you today?
I am great. How are you, Allison?
Wonderful. It's been great to meet you in this brief few minutes before recording already.
Yes.
You're over in North Carolina, right?
I am.
Yeah.
I usually don't like to divulge my location and give the state any promotion at all.
Oh. Well, then we'll say you're over on the East Coast then.
There you go. I'm in the Southeast.
There you go.
There you go.
Cool. Well, we're on opposite sides of the country, which is, I can gripe a little bit about technology, but it's kind of great in this way.
It's absolutely amazing because, I'm old enough to remember when we did not have this. I remember when I got my first computer in 1981, and you could basically text somebody from your personal computer, and we thought that was amazing.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah, we thought that was really quite incredible. So,
It's pretty awesome. It's gone so far since then in such a short amount of time.
It is. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to chat with you today and hear your stories and hear what you have to say. The first thing that we had gone back and forth in email, and decided to start with, was you had pointed out that one of the questions that I ask each guest kind of didn't sit with you very well. And so I'd love to hear, before I go into it much, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it was the question, what would make you feel equal, right? And it hit me why would you assume I don't feel equal? And totally. I just sort of, that was what stuck with me. And I think that was what I emailed. Is that what I asked when I emailed you back?
Yeah. You're like, what is this about? And you suggested to reword it. And I totally understand, because this had come up with, and I think I mentioned this to you, this had come up with one of my other guests where Melanie Bell, who the episode's already been released. And she was like, well, what, I just don't let anybody treat me like I'm not, because I am. So, but the intention of and you emailing me has kind of made me look at it, and I really appreciate it, because then I reworded it just a little bit to say, because to align with the intention, which was what would make you feel seen as equal given our world and the issues of racism around us and things. So that's the intention of the question. So I appreciate the feedback, because then I was able to align the question in a more straightforward way. So
okay, so I want to react to that change, because I thought about what was it that struck me about that. And I cannot remember who wrote this book, but it's called Mediocre. And basically,
I think is it Ijeoma Oluo?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Cover, I think. I started listening to it, and it really kind of supports what my take on it was, which is racism isn't about our inferiority. It's about protecting white mediocrity. And so that was the question. Sort of, I was like, okay, so that's a whole different way of seeing the issue. Because they think, and I don't know that, of course, I'm sure not all Black people necessarily look at it that way, but that's been my understanding of systemic racism, is it doesn't exist because I'm inferior. It exists because mediocre white people want to prevent the competition of people because to me, it suggests knowledge of the opposite, that if we let them in, kind of a thing, because otherwise, why would you need to keep us out?
Right.
And so it made me realize that I see this, I think, as the opposite, because I was this close from sort of do I think I'm better than a racist? Because I don't really want to think of it in those terms of who's better or worse. But it definitely made me think that, when it comes to racism, it's the problem isn't my inferiority. It's your insecurity with whatever it is that you're experiencing. I'm not going to say I'm superior, but it suggests the fear of Black superiority. And so it's like, are they afraid that that's what we will implement? Are they afraid that that's what we embody? Do you know what I'm saying? And so,
Mhm.
white rage, I think, sort of speaks to that same thing. Carol Anderson's book, I think, and she talks about, for people, for listeners who may not know what that is, she talks about, she traces the policy that has institutionalized racism, starting with the policies that allowed domestic terrorism to end Reconstruction. And so, one of the other, I'm answering questions for an article interview now, and I'm noticing something similar in their questions. Is there's things that I'm hearing in the question that's not exactly what's being said, and I'm very interested in what that's about, like what's happening
Mm.
there.
Mhm.
Um, in my work, it started out with us researching attention, and attention as a flow and as a personal intangible asset. And so I have had this sense that there's some sort of physics to it. I don't understand it. And the example that I think that we used to use was like great works of art. And I can't remember which piece it was, but at the time there was some piece, a Matisse painting, I think it was, that was being, no, it was a Van Gogh. It was a Van Gogh painting that had sold for, I don't know, $14 million or whatever it was. And we were talking about attention gravity, and like, was the value in relation to the amount of attention flow that had gone towards it over, the all these years. And at this point, does that price then reflect some kind of attention gravity? Do you see what I'm
Mm.
saying? Like, so much
Mhm.
attention has gone towards it. So does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, let me see if I am grasping it
Okay.
the way that you intend it. So, are you saying that to continue to ask questions in that vein, that we are kind of upholding the idea that you're not
Exactly.
equal,
That the
right?
attention is flowing into that question from that perspective. So that's the energy
Mm.
of the attention.
Mhm.
It's sort of my position with anti racism. You're never going to get the answer, the solution to racism through anti racism, because you haven't gotten people to acknowledge that race isn't a real thing. Race is a sociopolitical
Right.
construct. There is one
Mhm.
race, it's humanity, it's humans. Humankind is the race. We are the human race. When we talk about cultural legacies or cultural inheritance, that's what I think of when I say I'm Black. When I identify that way, that's what I am speaking to. I'm speaking to a cultural lineage, a cultural tradition that I inherit through my cultural identity as a Black woman. And
Mhm.
so there is, there has to, based on this work, and the reason that I use art is because to change things at a system level, you can't get there with that Einstein quote that I love so much. We can't solve the problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. That is what that embodies. And
Mm.
so it's been a real uphill challenge to get people to understand that attention work. So I started to focus more on just the outcome piece. Okay, I can use this particular system to help transform a challenge into a launch pad. So racism, a cure for racism project is basically that, applying my system to that challenge. It doesn't directly bring people into a whole conversation about the attention flow, but that's what's behind it. That's what's underneath it. That's the foundation of that work, and those processes, and getting people to think about their problems in a different way. And in this case, it would be race. And it starts with acknowledging race is not a real thing. It's a sociopolitical construct, which then leads to, well, why would you need to create a sociopolitical construct called race? Well, to determine who are the haves and the have nots. And then how would you go about doing that?
Mhm.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's an attention thing at work there. And that's really the heart of my research, is using art to explore that. But there's I don't know what the market is for that. um, I
Oh,
couldn't
I
figure
think
out a
that.
way to make a living
Oh,
that
yeah,
way.
with art
No, with
combined,
the
that's always
attention
hard.
research,
Yeah,
using
yeah.
that, the attention
Oh,
research
okay.
as the art. Well,
Mhm.
using art as my methodology
Right.
for that research,
Yeah.
it's very, academics. And since I'm not a professor, there wasn't really an avenue.
Yeah, it's really an interesting approach though, because I do think that any type of art, I'm a musician, so any
Okay.
type of art or music is an avenue towards a better understanding and education. It's not just art in itself or music in
And it
itself.
communicates at that deeper level, like with
Mm-hmm.
music, there's the way you hear the music, what you hear and what you're interpreting, but there's also the feeling of the vibrations from the instruments and the music and the way
Yeah.
it interacts. And some music, you feel it that way.
Yep.
Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like that to me is like what's happening with that artist's attention and the production of that piece, that is the experience. And so, I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, I'd love to just go around exploring that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I, with research, you always have to figure out how to commercialize it, and with attention, what ended up, this is the before Facebook became the thing, when we were much more idealistic about what the future of the internet was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And this uplifting of humanity and all this bringing
Sure.
people together and all this stuff but they took that attention concept and wanted to commodify it. And that's where I think sort of like the data mining, Facebook becoming like the king of data mining. But when I was looking at those issues, that's not what I was thinking at all.
Sure.
In terms of application. And I was thinking, I mean, the data mining piece wasn't what I had a problem with, but I saw it being used more. I still want to do this, but using it as the basis of a community economic system that could actually create universal basic income. So imagine if that had been done that way for the public good instead of privatizing it to be brokered, because that's basically an intangible asset that belongs to you, and all these people are brokering it and you're cut out of that deal. And that just doesn't make any sense because they couldn't do that. I'm on a quest to help people understand this and use art to help people understand data in a different way, because I think that if more people understood it, then we could have a policy change. And I think that if people understood that we could have universal basic income without increasing taxes, I think that's a revolutionary idea. But so
Mm-hmm.
that was where I was going with the research in the
Yeah.
beginning. And I fell into consulting basically to pay for my projects. It was the
Mm-hmm.
way when I was doing community development projects, it was how I got programs for my guys. I would offer consulting to have somebody else come and present their program either for free or without cost. And I'll do, how much would you charge for that? Fine. What are your problems? Okay. I'll be your consultant and I'll give you this much in consulting. And when we go over that, I'll do like a weekly payment plan, to make it like really easy for people to say yes. And that was how I first put my programs together. So that's how I actually started consulting.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. You never know where your passions will take you and the path that
Right.
it's going to take on. Yeah.
But anyway, that attention piece is, I'm still very interested in that. I still think it has a lot of promise because it's not been explored to its potential. So for now, I focus on the kind of solutions and trying to get people engaged in a way that they are dealing with these issues, recognizing themselves as part of the system. And so
Mhm.
I call it a soul food framework. And so racism only shows up when we bring it. So it is a poison that is within us, and we bring it to everything that we see, create, or experience as an ingredient of self. And so the process that I share in A Cure for Racism is about helping people identify that poison, and I teach them a process so they can begin to remove it, because it's not a one-time thing, but it's something they can use, and also to take down the stress of doing this kind of work, to bring
Mm.
some fun, imagination into it, and also to help give people a way to deal with the guilt or shame that they might feel about the things that might come up for them, because I think that's also a big part of it.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I'm going to ask you all about that project because I'm curious. But before we move along, one, I really appreciate your response to the question, the whole question thing. And that's part of the reason why I enjoy that question in a way, because I've gotten such a variety of responses to it. Though I do see your point in it and am definitely going to explore how to adjust or what to do next with it. So if you have more feedback that you would like to share at another time or now, just let me know. But I
maybe just a more open-ended question about their thoughts about equality or inequity.
sure. Yeah,
Maybe
that's a
something
great
more
point.
open,
Hmm.
more neutral.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can I just say, I applaud you for being able to have that conversation, because that's one of the things that's really, I think, shows like this really do a service, because you are modeling something that a lot of white people don't know how to do. And they avoid it like the plague, because it's crossing that line of going from what I know into the unknown. And so it's important for them to see this modeled in a way that they understand you're not going to die. It may be uncomfortable for a little while. And I've been comparing it to birth. Do you have children?
I don't. I have a stepdaughter, but I have
Okay.
not.
Have you ever watched a birth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's like when you go from that point of like, okay, the contractions are coming, and then it gets really intense. They call that transition, when the baby's like crowning, and that's when
Mm,
it gets really intense. And if with your first kid, that doesn't happen after you've had more than one, but with the first one, it makes you think you're going to die, because something is about to happen that you've never experienced before. And it feels like nothing else that you've ever experienced. You have nothing to compare it to. There's nothing anybody can say that helps you understand it. And then when it's happening, there's just that fear of, I might not survive this. And I compare it to that. But then if you move through that, it gets easy after that. Like, that's the hardest part. And then after that, the
mhm,
whole thing is much easier.
mhm,
So I think it's like that. It's like it's crossing that line of what you know into the unknown, and it's just fear. And fear is not going to kill you. And as a personal innovation mentor, I tell my clients, it's like, and I'm with you. So, there's no reason to freak out.
totally.
I know
Yeah.
what I'm doing. I've had 3 kids and I had them at home. I know
Yeah.
how to coach you through this.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. It just takes being willing to go through that uncomfortableness and seeing the purpose to go through the uncomfortable feelings. So
So thank you. Bravo to
yeah.
you
Oh
for
no,
modeling.
thank you.
How
Yeah.
did you
Appreciate that.
learn that?
Oh, it's been a process for me. That's a great question. I think there's a lot of ingrained as I'm learning, there's a lot that's been ingrained just from our culture and from growing up in rural areas. I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. And so just things that are ingrained in the community that you don't even recognize when you're growing up, or things like our US history and blah 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 that just is not accurate, not complete, not anything. Um that until you start looking at I don't know. What spurred it though to your question is experiences working at a venue in downtown Seattle where I was just exposed to so many different events that I really appreciate being exposed to. But the biggest transformation for me has been meeting my husband, who is Black and grew up in Seattle, and having my stepdaughter who is also Black, of course, and just seeing the world through their eyes more, and just that as a white woman growing up in suburban, mostly rural white communities, you don't realize what's actually happening in the world for people of color. So until you get outside of that zone or reach out and branch out to other people that
Mm,
do go through these experiences, and then all of a sudden you love people who are in it, because I think before I met him, I had experiences through college and all kinds of great experiences where I met all kinds of people from around the world, but still didn't have the conversations and things where that opened my eyes to what they may be going through in these
mm,
circumstances. It was more just, we had a common interest of music or a common interest, and that's what we would connect on. But I didn't have that deeper knowledge of what they may be going through day to day or month to month. So then meeting my husband and our experiences together, where he would notice things straight away and have that antenna for things. And I think
right.
before we started recording, you were mentioning something about being hyper aware of
Mhm.
certain things, and I just didn't have that. I'm like, what, really, are you sure? So gradually through conversations and experiences with him, that's really opened up my awareness, and we both say now, and he definitely says, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it just builds on that. And I think as humans, we are all like, no one of us is free to be if one of us isn't free to be. So there's once I saw it, I can't unsee it, and I have to do something. And this project is a part of that. So that's a long answer to your question, but
It's a great answer.
thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate this project so much because now, I mean, it's spurred on from conversations with my husband, and like everybody should benefit from these conversations that I'm having with him. How can I help that,
Right.
and without doing it in a way that's like, please teach me all that you know, or but just hearing people's stories, I think in general is so connective and important. So in meeting all the people that I've interviewed so far, or some of the people that I had already known, it's been amazing. And I'm just really grateful that people are appreciative and connecting to this project in the way that they have. I mean, we just started, so
Right.
so but yeah,
You've
so
done quite a
yeah,
few episodes, though. I mean, you've talked to quite
yeah.
a very different kinds of people too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's been awesome. And part of me is like, this is what I love to I just love to listen to people. So now I feel like I've been talking way too long. And
Well, I think
so
your story is
yeah,
interesting too.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, I would love to hear your background, like if you're comfortable sharing where you grew up and who you were surrounded by. I would love to hear that, and then I would love to hear more about your work that you were mentioning with A Cure for Racism and all that
Oh,
too.
okay,
Yeah.
sure, sure.
So, but yeah, where did you grow up?
In the Carolinas,
Okay. Yeah.
was born in South Carolina, grew up in North Carolina. Got married, moved to Atlanta for a while, or outside of Atlanta. Around 2000, yeah, like 2000, came back to North Carolina. My boys were about to become teenagers. And I felt like it was really, my grandfather was still alive. And I
Mm,
was becoming aware that they needed to have like a Black man in their life. And also, my mother was here and my brother. And so I thought my grandfather, my brother could, be like Black men role models for them. They do have a dad, but my husband is white. And so he is from Lake New Jersey and couldn't really address those kinds of things. And then
sure.
also looking at the foundation that my grandparents had provided for me, I thought I wanted my kids to have that. And in Atlanta, we didn't have any family or anything. And
Mhm.
so we moved back here, and I thought it would just be for a few years, but I'm still here 21 years later. um,
Mhm.
and so I think I shared with you that I aspire to move to Washington. I think Seattle, but I'm
Mhm.
open to what the universe will, present. So I grew up here, and then I came back to do community development work. I never thought I'd be in the South this long because I don't, I guess I shouldn't say I don't like it. There are aspects of the culture that I guess I do like, because when I was in Atlanta, I remember missing the way people would just stop in the middle of the street and have a conversation in their
Mm,
car. Like somebody was in their car and somebody might see them from their yard and like yell out, "Hey, Allison!" And then you'd
mhm.
stop in the middle of the street and they'd come out and you just stand there. When somebody would come around, you just go around, go around. And
Right.
so silly things like that. Like I remember
Mhm.
missing that. There was a barbecue place that I missed. I had a friend who used to FedEx me barbecue
Oh, nice.
and cheddar cheese bagels from this bagel shop. Um, but mostly it's like my mom, my brother, and so I don't really have community here. So it's not. I don't feel like it's my community, although I vote here and that sort of thing. But I've never had like a politician that I really wanted to vote for. It's more usually voting against
Mm,
someone else kind of a thing.
mhm.
Because we're dealing with like voter restrictions, and I think they're trying to do the voter ID thing again.
Mm,
So just that kind of thing, and trying to, if not necessarily in my area, through the organization that I'm doing the A Cure for Racism with, We the World. It's a New York City nonprofit. Working with them to help educate people about different organizations that exist to for example, I think it's called Bridge Alliance that has a course that educates you about how districting is done, because we have a lot of problems with like gerrymandering. Do you have that? I don't know if you have that there.
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was everywhere, but
Mm.
but
Well,
I
they
don't
brought
know
it to an
about.
art farm. They're like these ridiculously drawn districts
Mm,
that make no sense except for the political agenda
right.
that's behind them. So, like educating people about that, how to get involved before it gets to the legislative branch, when it's still the community, when there's hearings, and so getting people educated about that sort of thing, because I think we need that level of civic engagement, particularly with minorities or non-white populations, to be engaged at that level and not just at the voting at the ballot box, because there's a lot of things that we could probably prevent from even getting to the bill stage. And I think that it would require less in terms of resources. You don't need a ton of money to like pay lobbyists if you start at that level. So like
Mm,
educating people about that sort of thing in a general way, since I couldn't really engage enough people in my local community around that sort of thing. So, kind of like I've always been kind of geared towards activism,
mhm.
being an advocate since when I was 13, I started with the Democratic Party, working the polls, working for different campaigns and
Oh, wow.
things
Yeah.
like that. And then when I was 15, you two introduced me to Amnesty International. I shared that story with somebody the other day, and I was talking about you two, and it was like the band, and it was like back in those days, they were what getting their music was like an import item.
Oh, yeah.
And it
Mhm.
was like I could tell like he didn't know what I was. So I was like,
Oh,
okay, so back in the days of albums, you
sure.
got records from Europe or Africa or anywhere else abroad, you would get them through like an import distributor. And those are special orders, and not all record stores would do them. And
Mhm.
so when you found one, it's like that was like the cool store. So that was
Yep.
kind of like that was my jam when I was young. And when you would get bands like that, like those little indie bands didn't have a lot of money. And that was back when, album jackets were like art pieces sometimes.
Mhm.
And so instead of elaborate, jackets, or you would get like a cassette, like they were photocopies, black and white, but they would give you flyers from their shows would
Oh,
be
yeah.
included. You get like almost like a little package,
Mhm.
stickers and Amnesty International stickers and Amnesty International brochures, I think were part of it at that time, because they were doing Amnesty concerts.
Mhm.
And I got really into that. And that sort of that was like my first date with my husband was an Amnesty.
Oh,
He
really?
was
Oh,
working,
nice.
yeah, we were working, well, I was working a table,
Mhm.
and we had a date, like a lunch date. It's like, well, I have to go do this thing. And like, he still wanted to hang out. And so I was like, well, you can come to this with me. We told the story in the Wall Street Journal in an article about love at first sight,
Oh.
because I didn't know how to introduce him. And I was working the booth with an ex
Oh.
boyfriend. And
Oh.
I couldn't call my date my boyfriend. So there was just a lapse of like, I
Right.
fumbled, like I didn't know how to introduce him. And he said, I'm her future husband, or she's my future wife, which, however you want to look at it.
Wow.
And he turned out to be right. It's been
Wow.
over 30 years. 30th
Wow.
anniversary was in September.
Oh,
And that
congratulations.
was, thank you. And that was my senior year of high school. So that
Oh,
was,
wow.
yeah, I know, right? That was a big turning point. And
Yeah.
I think I was sort of, I was an optimist fighting it, I guess that's what was happening. But I got much more optimistic, I think, after that. And my
Mm.
life just got a lot sunnier and happier.
Mhm.
I was able to really focus more on my art, and then the activism and advocacy. I was always involved in homelessness. So when I was raising my kids, that was something I was still involved with. I was a mentor for homeless women with children, like a family mentor, help them like just do grocery budget, plan meals, cost effective meals, look at where they were spending money, help them come up with a budget, and
Yeah.
parenting stuff, hanging out with them so they could see basically alternatives to like spanking and yelling at your kid, and just
Mhm.
kind of like modeling and just be somebody they could talk to. So that was, I guess, like that really was eye opening to, because I'd sort of drifted into like, sort of a stay home mom type life. I didn't really know any single parents, I didn't know people that were really struggling. And so it got me sort of reconnected, because I did grow up around, people who were struggling, even though I was sort of living like my comfortable life in the suburbs. That was kind of like how I knew that wasn't going to be enough. Like that wasn't going to be my life. So I was still doing art and I wasn't doing as much because it was harder, with the kids. So I homeschooled my kids, and we had like, natural home birthing, and lived that whole kind of, my friends used to call it, what is it? Granola crunchy lifestyle, um, with the Birkenstocks and all of that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I had like long dreadlocks back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And the jumper dress, I used to call that the homeschool mom uniform.
Oh,
The,
yeah. Yeah.
the it's the big pockets, man. That's what it is. It's the
Oh, yeah.
pockets.
You need
Because
those.
kids are giving you stuff all day,
Yeah.
and I would just unload my pockets when I got home. So like that
Yeah.
was my life for a while, and so it's like trying to figure out how to balance the things that were important to me. So I started working with what was it called? There was like the Peach program. It was a welfare to work program in Georgia. And I helped a few of the women who did not get the grants, because I thought, my opinion, I didn't thought the grants went to like people that did not have the greatest ideas. I was like, I would totally not have given the money to that person, but that's all right.
Mm.
And that was like the early days, like desktop publishing and faxes and
Oh,
that sort
sure.
of thing. So I helped them
Mhm.
help them put together a basic business plan and bootstrap their idea. One woman, the woman that I remember I stayed with the longest, hers was gourmet sandwiches and salads delivered to a couple of office parks that were out like on Buford Highway. So they weren't near any restaurants or anything. And there was just the one snack bar downstairs, which was just sort of like hot dogs, hamburgers kind of a thing. So people would fax their orders in to me, and then I would send them to her. I got her set up on Prodigy to get emails. I would email them to her until she got a fax machine, and then load them up in her cooler, and we'd go and take them and
Oh,
deliver them
yeah.
to people. Got this church that I volunteered through, even though I didn't go to service, but I volunteered there. They let her rent their kitchen for $20,
Mm. Oh, that's
for
great.
in the
Yeah.
morning to like do the orders. So orders had to come in by a certain time, and so she was able to bootstrap it and eventually get that space in that building,
Wow. That's
and open
awesome.
up her little salad lady gourmet sandwich bar, or whatever it was called. I think it was called the Sandwich Lady or the Salad Lady or something like that.
Mhm.
But that kind of put me on the course with consulting. That was the point of that
Oh,
story.
yeah. Yeah.
So I was still in my early 20s. So I still felt like I was growing up, because that was the first time I'd been away from my mommy. And, you know,
Mhm.
those were the first people that knew me only as an adult. They only knew me,
Oh,
as a
yeah.
grown up. So that was like a big deal. So I feel like
Yeah.
I grew up there, even though, I had all my school experiences and stuff. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, so that was what I forgot to mention. I did drop out of school to get married and move to Georgia.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Yeah, I was in art
Yeah.
school, and I already had like some commissions. And my introduction to racism was with institutional racism was through school. So it was not like a
Mhm.
fan of school. College wasn't much better. And the
Mhm.
visiting professors that I really liked were all leaving, either because they couldn't get hired. The black professors were leaving because they couldn't get hired full time, so they were leaving to go back to DC. And I can't Melanie, I think was her name, was from California, and she couldn't take the racism. Um,
Yeah.
and she was tired of
Mhm.
painting tobacco barns.
Oh.
Um,
Mhm.
because that's the kind of art that the gallery, the museum here had back in those days, was lots of rural, tobacco barns and that kind of scenery. And she
Yeah.
just couldn't really stomach it anymore. So I was like, now there's nobody here that I would really want to learn from. So he had asked me to marry him. I was like, all right, let's do that.
Yeah.
I can do the art anyway, because I already had like a couple commissions. So I was sort of feeling like I can do this without them. And it was a hostile environment. I mean, and I just wasn't going to pay for that anymore.
Sure.
That
Yeah.
was kind of part of it too, was I was running out of money and I was going to have to get a loan. And I was really thinking about like, if we both have to get loans, because he got cut off. And so his father wasn't going to pay for school anymore. So, because of the whole interracial thing, although he would always say that's not what it was, but yeah. Okay.
Mm. That wasn't your impression.
That was not my impression, and that is not the story that I have heard is told. I have
Mm.
heard that it was because we were living together, and it's like, other people lived together, they did not get cut off, and they still got a house when they got married. We didn't get any
Mm.
of that. Um,
Mm.
so, yeah, I was just like, there didn't seem to be any reason to stay here. I never really liked school anyway. And I wasn't even really majoring. I wanted to major in art therapy, but there weren't many places in the States that offered that
Mm.
as a major. And the schools that did, they were all private schools that I couldn't afford. So I was just a general, fine arts painting major. And I was like, what am I going to do with it? I thought I was going to be an art teacher. And I had gotten a part-time job um, working with an after-school program, and discovered it's like, I don't even know if I like kids. So I definitely don't want to be a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my plan was falling apart. It's like, okay, being an art teacher is totally not going to fly. Yeah.
Mhm.
The kids themselves weren't that bad, but like dealing with kids that had issues and their parents not wanting to address them, the administration not really wanting you to go to social services without, like, you had to see like the child bleeding. It's like
Mm.
at that point it's kind of too late. I mean, this could still be an intervention. She's still young. But so anyway, I was like, yeah, I'm not. That's not going to work. So I don't know. Does that tell you where I grew up?
Totally. Yeah.
And now you see why I'm vague about the Southeast thing.
Understood. Yeah. What's your favorite art medium to work with? Do you have
Well, I
you
still
continued that?
paint,
Yeah.
but the work sort of expanded because I really wanted to do like modern experimental art installations, but I was deterred because that wasn't apparently something a Black girl could do. And so nobody encouraged me to do that, and I
Mm.
believed them. So I sort of settled on painting. So I still do a lot of painting, but all this work that I do is actually part of my art now. I mean, like this is part of a performance. I have a whole we did a well see I don't have the makeup on now, but usually we have like a whole Pinterest board I got with a makeup artist, and I consulted with an acting coach and to develop this persona to do the work, because I this wasn't really necessarily what I wanted to do. But all of my business coaches kept telling me that you have to get out there, Yvette, you have to talk to people. And I sort of like stepped out and I did some workshops and I did conferences. And they're like, no, you have to talk to like, do interviews and like really talk to more people.
Mm.
And it took a lot of years for me to really figure out that I could use this embodied performance to do this. And so I worked on creating what I would need to embody to do that, to be able to do this. And so this is part of the work. The whole thing, I mean, the idea was an inclusive art movement. That was, the idea as the basis for community change management. And so when I talk about that, though, it goes like, shoot. So I don't really talk about that. But that's kind
Mm.
of like the foundation of it. There's like a whole wiki site. We spent years, like, working on all of this language and verbiage and like breaking down words and these terms to develop this framework that I'd mentioned to you before. So all of this is still my art, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And
Yeah.
then along the way, I create artifacts. And that's what I consider the physical pieces to be, are my artifacts. So part of that is also like one of the things with social media. I had a question about social media that somebody, in terms of feeding into the polarization and how do we do it differently. And I was like, well, one thing is people need to like actually start journaling and stop using social media like their public journal.
Yes.
You know, somebody had asked me about relationship advice a couple weeks ago, and I was making the point that when you have an issue with somebody, you need to separate what the issue is from your feelings. Deal with your feelings on your own privately. That's what journaling is for. And then you can come to the issue conversation with a lot more clarity and a lot less baggage.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think the same thing sort of applies here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Um, so a lot of my
Yeah.
art is about using essentially that understanding to process things as they come up rather than just reacting or projecting onto people. Because all of this was about what would be an alternative to protest art. This was during the after 9/11 when we got into the Iraq War, when that was starting. And the question that got it started was, what is peace? And then through exploring that question, realized that this was my process. My practice was all about using art to get clarity, to understand, to see things differently. And so we just kind of like went with that. And this idea of like, okay, what if you could have like an inclusive art movement, where you engage people on what they love, what they're passionate about, and engage them on the level of an artist, whether they identify that way or not. And yeah, I just decided like I'm gonna go with that. So I'm still going with it. I feel that at some point it will be understood as art. Because it was like man, I feel so old saying anyway, like 2006 or something like that. And I was looking back at like Yoko Ono. She was doing, I think it was like this peace tree and this project where she signs this beam of light up on John Lennon's birthday every year. And she had this wish tree. That's what it was, a wish tree. But it opened on the International Day of Peace. And I went back and I was looking at her work because I remember as a kid, whatever I'd heard about her left a negative impression. At some point, I became interested in her, aside from whatever this impression was. And she started with like something called the Fluxus movement in like the late 60s. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of her early stuff where she's just like, it's her in a room, like screaming, like doing different intonations and things. And so she was in the writing about it in interviews. They talked about how the artist can't be separated from the thing that they're creating. And so I started thinking about that in terms of business and change and how all of these things are ingredients and how art is essentially a model of inclusion. Because art is all about how do you include everything? Nothing's excluded. Everything can be included. And so that's why art remains the foundation, because that, and on a practical level, but also it keeps me connected to my heart. And otherwise, I would get into my head and my judgments about things and people and all of that. So I don't think that that's, again, that attention thing that we started out talking about earlier. It's a way of my attention mindfulness and working in a way that's based on me paying attention to my attention. So that's what I'm doing with my art. And of course, like these are pieces that I'm thinking about now. So these are things that these are the last ones I've done. And
oh, lovely. Nice.
This one, I did this the night that I watched the George Floyd murder, but it's on top of something that was also about some racial stuff. Our parents met after we'd been married for 20 years for the first time at a dinner for our daughter's 15th birthday.
Oh, really? Oh.
And some people would have you believe that that's just a coincidence and that has nothing to do with racism.
Right.
And just my anger over that insistence and that denial. And so the piece that was under that is what I was painting over, because I no longer speak to those people. And I just decided I was at it's called Timeline. And so I have a couple of pieces that are done that are related to this timeline piece. But I just was feeling like I was putting that to bed. And then this happened. And the thing I had going on that I thought was going to replace it. Yeah, the George Floyd thing happened. And immediately I was like acrylic paint and acetone, and I used up all of my fingernail polish, and I sent my husband out to get another. Like I was like, get me one of those big industrial bottles, and that's what that is. So that's acrylic paint and acetone.
Wow.
Yeah, well, red, white, and blue. Why do we keep loving a country that doesn't love us back was what I was thinking when I first started it. So I still use the art, and this was, sort of related to that, and a systemic constellation I was a part of maybe the week after, a few days or a week after. And so this was something that came up in that constellation, and it was just it felt so big that I was like, okay, I'm going to have to do a series on you. So I've been doing a series of collages based on this painting.
Oh, okay.
So
that's awesome. Hopefully I get to see that sometime. That's awesome. Oh, we need you in Seattle. Just come on over. Just make it happen.
You see what I mean? I would find people who wouldn't even think it was that weird,
Oh, I don't think it's weird. I think it's beautiful. Yeah,
Um,
all of everything that you've been saying, I think is beautiful,
oh,
and I think maybe there is a reason why Seattle is in your mind.
well, I mean, I'm putting the call out to the universe officially. If it
Mhm.
wasn't official before, I am open to.
Sure.
So yeah, it's like I've been
Yeah.
waiting for something to present itself, like a
Yeah.
reason, because I
Mhm.
have found that things just work better that way. If you wait for a sign from the universe, it's so much easier than when I get it in my mind that I'm going to make something happen.
Try to force it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I've learned enough to know that.
Sure.
So for now, I'm just happy with the fact that I keep connecting virtually with all of you people from Washington. So I
Yeah.
feel like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a good sign.
Yep. Yep. We would love to have you. What else? We talked about the one question I have. The second question I ask everybody, though, is what brings you fun or joy?
I like to sing,
Mhm.
not like, in front of people, but just I love to come in here and, well, actually, I take that back. I sing when I'm out running errands and out and about. I sing all the time. That's one
Yeah.
of the things I do that I've always done that I think keeps me in a good mood is I sing. Hello, another cat. Is I sing a lot, like a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So music brings me joy. I don't dance as much as I used to. So I've been thinking about that. Like I need to dance more because that used to be like a lot of fun for me.
Mhm.
And like hanging out in the studio, painting. The work that I do is also, some aspects are more fun than others, but the work that I do it because I love it. And apparently it's hard for me not to do it because in 2016 I said I was done and I don't care anymore. And then 2017 I went on sabbatical and did this
Mhm.
Love Heals stuff, retreats and workshops and did that for a year. And I was like, crap, I still care.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. I hear you.
all right. Well, I come in the studio, it's like I come in here and I
Yeah.
have like some bead work. I make jewelry like this necklace. You can't see
Oh,
me.
nice.
So when I don't feel inspired, I put on music and come and I fix jewelry that I like to wear.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I love
Awesome.
crystals.
Mhm. Yeah.
Pull out my
Mm.
tarot cards or something.
Mhm.
That's fun. Playing with my cats and my dogs. Hanging out with my husband. Sitting and listening to music with my husband, looking at the fire outside. That's probably my one of those chill things, or taking a ride with our dogs. We
Mhm.
hold hands a lot. So I guess holding my husband's hand, that's
Aw.
something I do. That sounds so
Yeah.
boring, doesn't it?
No, sounds sweet. It sounds sweet, and that's what brings you joy, and that's beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I love
Not
him.
boring at all.
He's my dude.
Mhm. Yep. I can't thank you enough for joining me and sharing all of your thoughts and your story. Where can someone find your work, your art, the work that you're working on, any of that?
Empoweredinnovation.org is where you can find the work related to the cure for racism. I don't really share my art that much.
Okay.
You get a little bit of it in that introduction webinar. And if you sign up for that, I think with a donation, you get the playbook. And so the playbook has, let me see if I have it, some examples of that technique I was telling you about with the journaling. And then we transform the journal into a piece of art. And it's about taking that stuff you don't feel great about and transforming it. There's some questions and some internal inquiry that we do as you go on along. So there's some examples of like my artwork in there. So it is a picture of flowers in a vase. And here I'm going to bring it closer so you can see what I mean here. So see, the pictures are made up of the journal pieces of paper and they've been torn up and reassembled to create flowers. And then the paint to give it like depth and make it look like they're
Yeah.
popping off the page.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And
And
that's
so,
found on that website that you mentioned, is that right?
yeah,
Or
if you
like
go there,
your work, that
you
work.
can get the
Yeah.
playbook, and in the playbook, it guides you through the exercise, and that's the finished piece that I create in the playbook example. I am looking at doing some like live, like maybe some live streams doing these kinds of things. So if there's anybody that'd be interested in on jumping on and doing that with me, definitely reach out. Also, we.net. You can find out more about them. But if you go to empoweredinnovation.org or WebAntiphon.com, those links will take you to the virtual short film festival that I created for the 11 Days of Global Unity, and as well as A Cure for Racism, which is a part of our MLK 40 Days of Peace project. I launched that as part of that this year. And if you like A Cure for Racism is an intro webinar, but if you like that, there's like more to help you like dive into that and like really customizing my empowered innovation system for you. And if anybody wants to work with me or collaborate, that's the easiest way to reach out. And of course, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. I don't check Facebook very often, so Instagram might be better. Twitter, but again, not super active. LinkedIn, I get those notifications. So any of those places you can find me, and always happy to, explore collaborations and working with people who also share my interest in creating a better world that works for all of us.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to connect with you and to have this conversation with you and have you be a part of this project. So thank you for joining me and sharing your story. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I'll see you when you move to Seattle. No.
You absolutely will.
Yeah.
I'll totally email you. Allison, it happened. Yeah. That's going to be the subject line. It happened.
Yes. Perfect. I'm going to look out for that.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for joining us for Take Notice, Amplifying Black Stories. Please subscribe and follow us on social media. We are at Take Notice Podcast. It would really help us out if you could take a couple of minutes to review our podcast. Thank you for your support. Take Notice, Amplifying Black Stories is produced, hosted, and edited by Allison Preisinger Higgins, co-produced by Amanda Ray. Music by Version Big 5 featuring Darius Higgins. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for taking notice.